Do you watch games like Critical Role, Dimension 20, and Legends of Evantris? And you think to yourself, how do I make my characters get emotional?
And I just feel connected to everybody. And some connections are made with wires, and some are made with blood, and some are made with bone, and some are made with wood.
Well, I am here to tell you how to accomplish it as both a game master and a player. Yes, you heard that right. Players can do it as well. Welcome to Potion of Mastery. Come take a sip and let's become a master. So, the first part of this is I'm going to go through the Game Master section first, and then I'll do the player section, and I will make sure they're time stamped in the description. You should see the chapter and the timeline of this video. So if you're only interested in the playing, go ahead and skip to that. The time mark is also on the screen, but you can also just zip around to it. So go ahead and do that. Without further ado, let's get into the Game Master section. So the first thing you want to do when you're a game master to make your characters emotional is you want to make it. You're not able to do it without playing a campaign for a long time. If you're just playing like a shorter campaign, I would say likely 3 to 6 months long. It'll be a little bit more difficult unless you're playing every single week, which becomes harder and harder as you get older. So things like one shots and shorter campaigns make it a little harder to get your characters invested in other characters. So make sure your characters are invested, and then from there, what you want to do once you've invested them into your world, your story, things like that, you're gonna want to make sure that you've given them people to latch onto in the world, whether it be each other, whether it be um, a random NPC that you picked up because you know your players love the random NPC more than they love the NPC that has a stat block and you created well in advance. So make sure that they have something to hold on to, someone they want to protect, someone they want to save, that kind of thing. My best example would be you get them really close to a NPC. Maybe it's a goblin rogue that they meet along their travels, and they're going to help them out with obtaining something. But they realize that the backstory of this goblin rogue is actually very tragic. Um, Perhaps this rogue lost their parents and became an orphan at a very young age, old enough to still remember their parents and how great, what kind of people they were. And you would go into depth about how this goblin remembers and loved his parents or her parents. And then he helps them, he helps the party go into the dungeon, and something happens in the dungeon, and you're going to maybe he sets off a trap, which is unlikely for a rogue, so maybe someone else sets off a trap and it kills the goblin. Whatever it is, make sure they're attached to that character, and then once the time comes, make sure you see that character out properly. And I'll get to that in a future section. The second thing is make sure your characters have reason. Your characters can't just be thrown in. Sometimes, yes, your party, again, gets attached to those NPCs you make up on the spot, and that's totally fine. But even those NPCs should have a reason for being in the world. And usually they are, but it's only a temporary fill. So let's go back to my goblin example for a second. The reason he belongs in your world and in this campaign and with the party is because he also is trying to look for something that is said to be lost. He also wants a piece of the pie. You guys didn't want competition, so you brought him on but kept a close eye on him, only to realize that he's actually kind of a good person. Um, and he just wants the same thing you guys want. Um, he knows this item is very powerful and it's potentially going to, in the wrong hands, take over the world. You want to make sure that Goblin has a reason for being there, and you want to give him, again, purpose. So these two things together, reason and purpose, are going to make your characters a whole lot emotional at the table. And to be honest, it's not even just that. There's one more thing. Let's get to that. The third thing a DM needs to do in order to make their characters a little more emotional at the table is give everyone final moments. So, for example, remember when I said see the goblin out? Let's go back to that example. So your goblin just got hit with a trap from dungeon that they're exploring because of one of the other party members accidentally triggering it, and it just so happened to target the goblin's space. And it's put the goblin in range of death. And let's say your party has no spell slots left. What you need to do is make sure that you give them a final moment. And this is something you'll see a lot in like Critical Role when a character dies. They will always have final moments, whether it's talking to the group, whether it's talking to themselves out loud because they see, in this case, his parents. Make sure they get the proper final moments they deserve, because those final moments are usually the strongest moments in D&D for this exact thing. Also, when a player dies, one of your players dies, make sure you give them time to see their character out. Give them final moments. Because if you don't give them final moments, some people can make final moments really good, and those final moments will make you cry. Even the Dungeon Master most likely will cry, but if their final moments are, this is the way I was supposed to go out, I'm going to see my family now, they might not cry. They might be a little sad, but they're not going to cry. So try and bring emotion to the final moments if you can. If you can't, and and you don't have reason or purpose for this character that's dying, they might die a little less emotionally. Another good thing is players may from time to time sacrifice themselves, and I think we saw this in Critical Role Campaign 3 when FCG sacrifices himself and blows himself up.
But they all matter, and they, even in this dark, dark cave, they make every day a smiley day. And so I just sign off and go.
The red that's burning in FCG's eyes fades to a white, and a head turned to a smile towards all of you as you see the energy in the core begin. Odahan, you see, notices this awkwardly and goes to pull, and you just grab her and hold her there. before she even gets a chance to dart, there is a ball of crackling energy that just fills the space, holding aloft and burning. Rocks around are being pulled into and incinerated, and there's a bit of a gravity tug in its direction. You all kind of catch yourself in this moment of disbelief before it stops, leaving a crater in the ground. The sound of hundreds of small pieces of metal begin to sprinkle across the room. And the charred, lifeless body of Orhanthul is left there.
He still had his final moments. He said his piece about the group. Everybody was emotional. But he was sacrificing himself for his friends. And after 140 episodes or whatever it was, SCG was part of the family. And so everyone was so sad to see him go. But it was important for him to sacrifice himself. And in that moment, it was important for him to have his final moments. The realization that he needs to protect his friends. And even if this is the only way to do it, he's willing to take that sacrifice as long as they make it out alive. And that's what happened. They made it out alive because of SCG's sacrifice. And they even kept parts of him because he's a robot. So those final moments really got the group. And again, he had purpose. He had reason. Delve into their backstories a little bit. If you want the players to really, really get emotional, you want to addict them to your world. You want them to become the character and feel like they're actually losing something. So those are the big points here. Let's move on. As for the player section, I have 3 rules for this as well, and there's obviously a little more sub rules to helping you get to this, but I think these 3 points for the player are very important. So, the first thing you should do as your character, give your player depth. Give your character backstory. The way I did it at my table, which I know can be a bad DM move, is I said, don't write me 10 pages of backstory. Write me I'm okay with a page, but I don't want to read 100 pages of backstory between everyone. So most of my characters kept it small. Most of my players said, I wrote a sentence and a half. It's a trauma point for me. The rest is up to you. And I said, okay. And now it's my responsibility to give their players depth. And they're also going to give themselves depth. They'll make up their own stories about their life. And that's okay. They can totally do that. And I like seeing them do that. But it's also my job as a game master to help them create that depth, help them create their characters' moments that bring them closer to the group. And not all DMs are like that. Some write multiple pages of backstory, and that's okay too. And the dungeon master just has to work with it and incorporate it into the world. But you're going to want to, even if Talison's characters died, people would still be sad. He's the asshole of the group. He's the badass of the group. He's typically the one who wants to show off in the group. And that's okay, as long as he has the depth going for him. And the dungeon master in Critical Role, Matt Mercer, does do it very well that if, Talison's character did die, whether it was Percival, whether it was Ashton, they would probably get emotional. Now, I don't think he's ever died in a campaign, but you just never know. Um, and I feel like he would be one of the most emotional deaths out there because Taliesin is actually really fucking good at what he does at the table, along with Liam. Liam is one of my favorites just for the role play aspect of it. But Talison's really good too, and I think it would be a sad moment to see Taliesin give us some final moments with any of his characters. The second thing you need to do as a player is give your character a purpose. You've given them depth, you've given them their backstory, you've helped them bond with your group, but now they need a purpose. What drives them? In my campaign, my barbarian currently wants to kill the man who killed and burnt down everyone in his half-orc village, making him one of the sole survivors. And just so happened that he met another half-orc that he knew from his village who left 3 days before the fire, which was a little coincidental for him. And he always held a grudge against him, but he remembers the man at the village wasn't exactly a half orc. He was human, so he didn't have a direct tie to it, but he might have hired someone. Or at least that's maybe the thought, right? So my barbarian's purpose is literally just to kill the people who had anything to do with his village. Little does he know, there's a lot more to the man who killed his entire village and burnt it to the ground. Don't want to get too into it, but that's kind of the purpose he has. As for like another character or whatever, for example, my girlfriend's character, her character wanted to leave the underwater kingdom and head for land. She wanted to see what the land was like. She comes from royalty, sheltered. Her brother just took the throne. Her father recently passed. And the brother's very protective of her, and so she had to sneak out of the kingdom and go to land that she was told many stories about by her tutor, who taught her fire magic under the sea. And so now she's pursuing to see what she was told about. So her purpose is just to get a taste of what the land is like, what above the sea is like. And so far we haven't gone too far into it, but I have plans, and I plan on bringing things up in the next couple sessions with her character, whether she likes it or not. So you need to make sure you have your backstory moments, and you need to make sure you communicate with your DM if they're not giving your character enough attention to give your character that slot in the campaign. Don't let your characters feel left out, GMs. And if you are feeling a little left out, please, I highly suggest that you talk to your DM. And maybe your DM just isn't for you, and that's okay. And again, some campaigns, there isn't a whole lot of backstory because it's not meant to be backstory driven. It's supposed to be heroic driven, or, and maybe that's just not the type of campaign you want to be in, and that's okay too. Some campaigns aren't meant to be sad and emotional, and most times you can go full campaigns without dying or losing a character, and that's okay. And most times those deaths aren't going to be emotional. But for those who want to experience the Critical Role experience, your DM might run a campaign in such a manner. And then, last but not least, if you want to make your friends cry at the table, including your dungeon master, if you are about to die, or if you're about to sacrifice yourself, make sure that you give yourself emotional last moments that people are going to remember at the table. For example, I mean, I didn't die, thank God, but if I was willing to sacrifice myself for the rest of my players as we fought a lich in, I believe it was Avantris or Baldur's Gate, I was playing a barbarian minotaur, um, and I used everything I had to run, jump at this lich who was on a floating skull, tackle him off of the skull, and into a thousands of foot pit. And on my next turn, I then proceeded to kick him faster and further down the pit, take out my immovable rod. I think I was a barbarian rogue, perhaps. And I clicked the immovable rod, and it just stopped me in place. And then I did a whole little monkey bar thing and kind of swung around and landed on my feet on the immovable rod until my friends could come save me. If I didn't have that immovable rod, though, I would have had to thought of some final moments. And I mean, this was a short campaign. Like, this was pretty much a 3-shot campaign or something like that. So maybe there was no tie to it or ties to my character. My character had no purpose, had no depth, really. So I had to give one hell of a final moment if it came to that, if I wanted to make the rest of the table cry and emotional. So, if you guys enjoyed this episode of Potion of Mastery, I highly suggest hitting that subscription or that subscribe button. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss another one of my videos. I do videos for both players and game masters because I am a forever GM, but I do like to play every once in a while, and I'm really good at playing because I'm creative. And I think that's one of the dangerous things you can do is let your GM play as a character in your game, because they will try and bend the rules as much as they possibly can. And it's fantastic. But anyways, hit the subscription, hit the notification bell so you don't miss another player or GM video here on Potion of Mastery. Hit the like button, it helps me out a lot, gets me into the YouTube algorithm. Leave a comment down below as well for engagement. And without further ado, I'll see you guys in the next video. Happy playing.